which is hurt feelings. And I want to get specific here. So you all know what it's like to have your feelings hurt. Someone says something that's maybe insensitive or cruel, or maybe to them it was just no big deal, and it stings, and you think about it for days, and your feelings are hurt. So today we're going to be talking about what's inside of that reaction, and where, how, and with whom the repair needs to take place, because it may or may not be with the person. So the topic, shadow work for hurt feelings. And if you've got a personal example of a hurtful comment that has been stinging you and that you'd like to work through, drop it in the comments and we can go through it live. So we have a how we got to this point. This was a listener question. And she had a situation. She wanted to initially talk about boundaries, but we dug in a little bit to like, what is it specifically about boundaries that you're referring to? And it turns out that a friend of hers told her she should lose weight. And so her feelings were hurt. She communicated this to him. And from what I understand, it's like he didn't think that to him wasn't a big deal. So, simultaneously not wanting to hurt her feelings, not wanting her to be hurt, but also his comment did hurt her feelings. And so where are they at now? He's sort of trying to apologize without really understanding what the problem is and doesn't feel his comments were a big deal. So what does this mean? She feels his comments were insensitive, which they were if you're sensitive to those types of comments. If you're not, it maybe wasn't such a big deal. And so that's where this angle of shadow work comes from. Where does our sensitivity come from? And how do we navigate it in relationship?
Fun stuff. I was just saying to Steph, oh, I got lots of hurt feelings.
Yeah.
Carried around tons of hurt feelings for many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
And they were all someone else's problem,
Of
someone
course.
else's fault.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly the point here, right? Is that we communicate the hurt and we want them to fix it for us, right? We're like, you caused this feeling in me, which in a way is true, right? Their comment gave rise to a feeling that exists within us. But as I said a moment ago, there are people for whom that would not be a painful comment. So what's really going on in there?
Yes. And you mentioned us making it the other person wrong and wanting them to fix it. So I've been in that scenario many times. In some occasions, in some types of relationships where I would lash out or point that out or make them wrong. I wouldn't necessarily say you hurt my feelings. I'd probably say, I think you're a not nice name. I would probably swear or something, right? But I also have fallen in the scenario where I feel the sting or the drop in the stomach, and then I smile and say nothing, like it
Hmm.
didn't hurt my feelings. So
Hmm.
for me, I notice it depends on who this person is, what our relationship is like, how badly I want them to like me and not leave,
Hmm.
all plays a role in what I do once I feel my feelings are hurt.
Hmm. So the closer they are to you, the more it might hurt. Is that kind of the gist?
So it depends. Like, would I say that? I think it really varied.
Mm.
Like, if my parents would have said something, I don't know. I think I became so protected and walled up that I wouldn't have even said, "You hurt my feelings."
Hmm.
I would have just said, like, "I hate you."
Right.
Like, I would have bypassed that whole hurt to that defended anger.
Yeah.
And I either would have said that to them or just thought it and felt that hate and anger. I don't think I would have associated that with my feelings were hurt.
Hmm.
Probably long ago when I was little, it was my feelings are hurt, but didn't know what to do with that feeling and that experience. And then it just slowly grew into no, didn't hurt my feelings. I'm not
Hmm.
letting you or anyone hurt my feelings. It's fine. You're just an ass.
Right. Classic.
Um, classic. And then there would be times where I would be in a relationship with someone, but the relationship maybe didn't feel solid. Like they were more in and out. And like maybe sometimes I felt like they were choosing me, and other times I felt like this connection is a bit fragile. And if they did or said something that hurt my feelings, that would more likely for me be a scenario where I would pretend that my feelings were not hurt.
Mhm. Yeah. And then what would happen in the relationship?
I think in that particular one, I wanted to be liked and loved and kept around so badly that I would just really distance myself from anything that was bad or hurt my feelings and really try to focus on, oh, this part is good and that part is good and that part is good.
Mhm.
And then I've been in other relationships where I finally had the courage to say, this hurts my feelings. Or is that right? No, I finally had the courage to admit to myself, this hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
But I was more on that lashing outside. So this is my relationship after the one where I stuffed everything down and just smiled, pretended like nothing hurt me. Then I was like, "You know what? That's not cool." Like, it does hurt me. I do wanna say something. So then the next relationship, it was like pendulum swing. It was like, "I found my voice and I'm gonna tell you, like, that was mean. That was not okay. I don't like this. I will not stand for this." And it was very firm. And, the message was clear that I was not happy. But I think in time I realized, well, that feels a bit harsh. I'm completely blaming on the other person, pointing all the fingers that they are in the wrong across the board, and not really reflecting at all about why did that stir that kind of reaction in me? Like, which part of it might be true what they're saying, which part of it hits on an old wound. Like, it couldn't
Mhm.
go to that place. And then fast forward in my relationship now, I have that ability to pause and notice, "Oh, that hurt." And I still sometimes feel that old pattern of, "Oh, it's fine." And then but it's loud enough and I'm listening. I'm like, "No, actually, it's not fine. I wanna say something." But the way that I bring it up is so different than how I
Oh, yeah.
used to.
Oh, that's a whole episode. I've been watching, we're back to 90 Day Fiancé, which
Mm,
for those who know me, I talk about this a lot. And we've got like Temptation Island. There's a whole bunch of wonderful new trash out. And watching the way these people bring up their hurt feelings, I'm like, please, Georgiana to rule the world. It would make all the difference if we could just know how to bring up our feelings without any of the blaming, without the huge charge. Like, I feel like this is partly our mission in the world to help people be able
mhm.
to explain themselves to each other in that uncharged way.
Yeah, because
So that's
most people that we interact with actually care about us, that we're choosing to spend time with and be in connection with. Also, they're all human, so they're gonna have their own wounding and their own defenses. So if we relay to them something that hurt our feelings in a way that's accusatory and blamey, chances are high we're not gonna get the response that we're hoping for, and then it's going to also affirm our old beliefs that see it, like, just causes problems if I bring up something that doesn't feel good, and nobody actually cares whether they hurt my feelings, and we just snowball into that one. That's not actually the case. It's just perhaps the way that I brought it up is a way that really stirs someone else's defenses.
right.
And it's not to say there's a perfect way of letting someone know they hurt our feelings, but there's definitely ways that are more, how do I wanna say this? That take more ownership of our part of it instead of just completely pointing the finger at them.
Yeah, and that are just balanced. So, like, that doesn't mean you have to be perfectly regulated and deliver your hurt feelings in this a way that anyone would receive beautifully. Like, we're, as you say, going to be dealing with the other person's conditioning, but we can own it by being like, I'm freaking out right now, and it's not your fault, but I'm doing it, and here it is. That in itself is ownership. You don't need to be at the end, and you don't need to be perfect.
Mhm, and for the people like me included who have already felt enough family of origin pressure to be perfect, watch out, because this is another way we can sort of pressure ourselves to be like, oh, now it's my fault also because I didn't communicate it in the best way. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about, can you bring some compassionate curiosity to what is going on for me when that thing was said or not said or not done that stirred up that big hurt?
Yeah.
And is there a way to share that with someone that helps them know you better? And
Hmm.
that's what I realize is people want to know us better. They want to get us. They're not trying to hurt us intentionally and treat us in a way that will for sure get us riled up. Like, that's not generally my experience with people. Of course, there will be the odd person who they just function that way and they operate that way, or their defenses are so at the forefront that it's consistently that way. But I would like to believe, and I think it's true, that most people want to learn us. They want to learn how to best support us. And they'd love to do that in a way that allows them to not feel like a crappy, horrible person.
Totally. And I think it's important to distinguish here between real life people and people on the internet.
Right.
The people we interact with day to day, our people and people out in the world, I think generally have a basic level of kindness, and they don't desire to be cruel to us. And the internet's a whole different place. So don't expect to go into like a comment thread and be received. That's just kind of not the jam. And this is so there's two pieces to this listener query. Um, the first is the relational repair piece with the person, and then there's the aspect of self, right, which is where the shadow work always lives.
Mhm.
So when we talk, I think generally about relational repair, at a high level, we're talking about wanting to feel better and wanting to feel in connection. And some of that is the purview of the other person and the relationship, and some of it is just ours, which again, we're back to the shadow work element.
Mhm.
But classically, what we mean when we talk about this is that we want to be able to communicate our hurt to the other person, and we want to be received and cared for in our hurt. And as you've mentioned, we're butting up against the other person's conditioning as well, right? So
Mhm.
think about it for yourself, whoever's listening and watching. If someone comes to you and says that they've been hurt by something you've done, what's your response? What comes up in you? You know, are you defensive? Are you open and loving? Do you abandon yourself completely? Like, there's going to be a lot of different reactions that you might have. And remembering that the other person is having those same reactions. So, when it's so hard for us to communicate our feelings in the first place, and then we get up all the courage and we figure out the words and we say the thing, all we want is to be held and received. And most likely, we're going to instead butt up against somebody else's self protection mechanisms.
Mhm. Yeah. And so I've really had to practice when you say, oh, I watch all these trashy shows and I watch people try to share their hurt feelings, and I wish everybody had some sprinkling of Georgiana around. This is a learned thing. Like, this was not something I knew how to do well or easily. It was me realizing I am hopping from one type of fake to another, right? Of pretending I'm not hurt to seeing it all as your problem to having to find some middle ground that feels self-honoring to me, like I'm standing up for myself, and also willing to see the good intention of the other. And like that's a muscle to grow, because the way I grew up is there's one right, there's one wrong, right? There's always a right and a wrong, which means only if I'm right, you must be wrong. And if you're right, then I'm wrong. None of that feels good for, you can't have two people will not ever feel good at the same time if that's the paradigm we operate in. But like, what if my feelings matter? Their feelings matter, and both of our good intentions are here somewhere.
Yeah. And maybe those good intentions are buried underneath an unfavorable reaction happening right now. Remembering those are still there. That's
Mhm.
pretty significant too. That's probably a whole episode. Um, so the shadow work piece, let's kind of get to there's three prime components we're going to talk about through this. And the shadow work element is so important because what we're talking about, especially in this situation, is a case where no harm was intended, but hurt was felt. So it's like, well,
Mhm.
if they didn't mean to hurt me, what's going on? Why am I still so hurt? And both of these things matter. But if you combine what the other person meant and intended with your reaction, conflating those things is going to keep you stuck somewhere instead of being able to relationally move forward. So,
Mhm.
the first piece, which we've touched on, is that reactions carry history. Our reactions are not just of the moment. What do you want to say about that?
Mm. That can be a very confronting concept and a very freeing concept, right? If I realize, oh, my reaction right now is not purely related to what is happening in the moment, then maybe I can realize that this current moment and this current relationship, this situation is not dire, completely dangerous, and I must burn it to the ground. The part that might be relieving. The part that is confronting is showing us, oh, there's something still a little bit sort of raw within me, a wound that's still raw within me that needs some tenderness and caring for, and curiosity and compassion. And sometimes we might be open to that. And sometimes we might be like, what is wrong with me? We go straight to the critic. What's wrong with me that's this still bothers me? What's wrong with me that I take everything so personally? And that can feel overwhelming to be like, how can I be doing this work for so long and still feel so reactionary, so reactive based on history? That can really feel, we've sat across people who feel really sort of what is the word? Just deflated and tired. And the good news is there's really simple practices to work with this to find some relief and to start shifting that old pattern of feeling like the history is forever going to haunt you, because
Mhm.
it doesn't have to.
No. And this is the rut people find themselves in with personal growth is that they've done all of this thinking and talking and discovering of their patterns. They know why they're feeling this kind of hurt, but it's not translating into their body. And that's because they've only been accessing it with their mind. And these are separate systems. You're talking about primary biological functions and really ancient wiring that has nothing to do with our intellect. And you're trying to solve it with your intellectual brain, but it's actually a
Mhm.
lot more simple. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Yes.
Hallelujah.
I like simple.
Me too.
I
And
like to
so
give my
that's
brain a break.
yeah, let's all give the brain a break. It's such a huge relief. So
Mhm.
the idea here of agency is super important. So you just talked about this being like a liberating and also maybe alarming, activating kind of a concept. And again, that's because it's so emotional. Like our emotions are completely wrapped up in all of this. So yeah, it does
Mhm.
feel really big. And so our first reaction is often to point the finger outward when that's happening or to point, a dagger inward with the inner critic. But in all of those cases, we're handing over our power, right? So if
Mhm.
somebody is making us feel some kind of way, then we've forked over all of our power to them. And they're the only people who can make us feel better. And guess what? They won't be able to. So then what?
No. And they might be able to momentarily for this
Oh, yeah,
time,
for a
but then it
brief
will just keep repeating and keep happening, right? And I love what our teacher Phil has said, and I'm gonna just paraphrase it, but I think he how I received his message was, if we allow our own sense of self wellness and worth to be tied to if and how someone responds to us, we have now imprisoned ourselves.
yeah,
We have put ourselves in our own kind of hell
yeah.
because our sense of okayness is now completely tied to if someone's going to respond and then how they respond. And if they have the capacity or willingness in that moment to really give us exactly what we need and the tone that we need, the length of time and the exact right words and the right body language, then we might be soothed for a while. And then maybe they like look away in a way that all of a sudden we make mean something else. And again, we're activated and now we're waiting again for them
Yeah.
to give us that soothing. And so life can feel very scary and uncomfortable when we outsource that sense of okayness.
Yeah, totally. There's a lovely young couple on the new Temptation Island, and as they're introducing themselves, they talk about some infidelity that happened a few years ago. And the woman describes her hurt feelings about it. The guy was the unfaithful party. And he then, listened and received her, and you can tell she's really looking at him to see what his response will be. She definitely is very entangled with him making her feel better. And what he
Mhm.
says is, "I've been faithful ever since, and I'm so like, it was horrible, like, seeing her crushed like this. I never wanna see that again, and it's just like, I can never get it right from here on out," you know?
Mhm.
This is the
Mhm.
source of all of these, "Why can you never trust again? Why am I gonna be paying for this forever? Why do you keep bringing this thing up?" And it's because there's an unresolved hurt, and we're trying to get it resolved by way of this other person, but it's an inside job. And that's why the
Mhm.
shadow work is so important. That's not to say that other people won't do things that are not cool and are unacceptable to you. But that
Mhm.
deep feeling of hurt and inability to let go and to trust again, that's either you're with someone who is not deserving of those, they're actually doing things that you shouldn't trust them with, or you've got an inner source, which is something you can actually tackle.
Mhm. And working through infidelity is not for everybody. And I think it's okay to admit that and own that. Like, it's fair to say, "Hey, I wanna try," right? Or it's fair to say, "This does not work for me." It doesn't matter if you're well-intentioned from here on forward, it doesn't matter if you never do anything that is untrustworthy again. But you're right in that in this example, that guy can only do so much to provide the reassurance and to rebuild trust, not to excuse his past behavior or say that he should have a free pass, but just technically, as a human, he can only do so much. The other piece is going to be, for the hurt party, like, what does that stir up in me? What old wound does it also stir up for me? And, like, when I work with those things, can I work with those things? Do I want to do the work that I need so that I can allow us to build something new going forward? Or will this person forever have to pay the price, which may be how it would go, and then you have to decide, is that a dynamic I wanna live in as the person who was hurt? And then as the person who's trying to rebuild trust, is that a dynamic you're willing to work in, where forever you will be seen as the party who did wrong, and no matter what you do going forward, it will always be tainted?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a lot of energy. Um, and I can definitely remember times in my life where what was most important was being directed by my attachment wounds, and it was partnership above all else. And
Mhm,
so I would ignore all of my own feelings and thoughts and fears, and I didn't have any of the tools that we've got right now.
mhm,
Now I do have the tools, and I know that I don't wanna spend my time and energy having to use them in that way. So probably for me, it would be a no, but it would depend on the circumstance, right? And I'm
mhm,
self-sourced enough now to know which would be true,
mhm.
and to leave space for all of the options.
Yeah, I feel like I'd probably fall in the same category. Like, if I think about the relationship that I sourced almost all my okayness from, if there was infidelity there, probably woulda crushed me, but the part of me that so wanted to be chosen, and I'd probably twist it in my mind still of, wow, even after he did that, he still chooses me now and wants to work
Yeah,
it out. And
amazing.
that would light me up.
Yeah.
But I think now, knowing what I know, having practiced what I practice, and again, this is not right or wrong. Everybody needs to make their own choice, and you know what's right for you.
Mhm.
But I think I'm coming from the same place as you. It's that I have a finite amount of energy, and the energy that I have, I do not want to use it for the purpose of continuously reminding myself that, like, this person is trustable. This person is trustable. Let me look for the evidence. Like, I don't want to use my energy that way.
Yeah, totally.
But someone else might say, I'm totally fine using my energy that way. And it still is situational. I can't say across the board, this is for sure what I would do. But for across the board, for sure, what I know is I'm much more um, discerning about how I want to use my energy.
Yeah, definitely. Something you said in there gave me a neat personal insight. When I was in those, I get the word is desperate, I think, circumstances. I was
Yeah, that's
desperate to have
what I was
partnership.
in.
And what is this? I don't know. Finger gestures. It was a whole problem that I had. This is me doing a whole problem. Um, there was a bit of relief when there was infidelity because I was
Mm,
like, I knew it. I was waiting for it. And now I don't have to wait for it anymore. I was so full
mm,
of distrust that it was like, phew, finally the thing that I shouldn't trust has occurred. I can get it off my plate. Um, Wild what we contain within us.
mhm. And then if you have any old stories of I think at that time this was a dude you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, men are trash,
Oh, right.
then you'd be like, "See? Men
Yeah,
are trash."
we knew it. Yeah, that's all they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, proving our stories
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. So, I know you said there were 3 things we wanted to touch on. Where are we on that right now?
We're at the third, which is that the trigger is the teacher. Sorry.
Sorry. You say it like that, and I've said it like that to people before, but somewhere along my journey in this, I decided that the trigger is the gold mine.
Yeah.
And you may not be at that perspective yet. You may not be able to imagine when or how you would ever be in a place where that is your perspective. But I do have to say, it's a wondrous place because it feels like doors are opening.
Yes.
Like parts of myself get to flourish and be alive again when I start to see, oh, like what part is this trigger showing me has been really suppressed down low, made wrong, unacceptable, hasn't been tended for enough. What hurt really needs to be held, in those loving arms again that got neglected somewhere along the way. And I have always come out of the other side of a trigger feeling better,
Yeah.
feeling more free.
Yeah.
But it does mean I need to sit in that part where everything in me feels like it's on fire, and I do want to throw daggers at people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah.
I kind of want to, I'm having different feelings about this as we're describing this. We've been talking about triggers for 10 years, and just a new facet just opened up to me right now
Mm,
about it. It's the activate so it's very activating, right? It's a big feeling. Like we're triggered, we can't hold anything back in that moment. We're blowing up in some way. And that's because it's the activation of a feeling that has been suppressed for a long time. When you're talking about doors opening up and there's a feeling of some kind of a liberation, it is that. And it feels wild and unpredictable in an unpleasant way. And we don't want it to be happening. But there is a
mhm,
beautiful element here. If we're activating an emotion that has been suppressed for a very long time and that needs space to breathe. And
mhm,
for that reason, we say this a lot in conscious relationship training, we say, fuck you and thank you. If you brought up a trigger for me, I'm so mad about it, and now I'm having all these feelings, but I
Mhm.
actually paid for this opportunity and I wanted to explore this. So also thank you.
Mhm. Mhm. And I have to say, like, if I'm really honest with myself, like, my ability to do this now, to, like, think the "fuck you" and "thank you," not necessarily say that to the people when it's happening, but really experience that. And sometimes it's not even a "fuck you," it's just a, "Hmm,
Oh,
interesting.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay." Um, it's because there was a period of my life where I set it up so I had a place to practice this with
Mhm.
people who like right in women's group and conscious relationship training, this is what we practiced. So I had a lot of opportunity noticing triggers and like being excited for them because I knew this is going to give me an opportunity to let out all the stuff that's been repressed for so long that I either get reactive outwardly towards people about or I get reactive inwardly and critique myself for and spiral in shame for. And that is gonna get to move out of me and release.
Mhm.
So that now the charge that I have when someone does hurt my feelings in real life, it's not as big, it's not as strong, it's still there. But I know that, hey, I might need to take this to this group of people first and sort of move some stuff, work through some stuff, express some things, move my body, and have it be around people who are like, "Yes, please, G, bring us your activation. Unload here." So that it doesn't have to come out in weird sideways ways in your real life. And then I get more clarity about what, if anything, does need to be brought back in my real life to the person.
Yes, absolutely. This is why you shouldn't be processing everything with your partner or the person you're dating, and why you want to have a safe container of either professionals or friends who are able to hold your activation without making it mean anything about you or about the moment or about themselves
Or about the
and
other person.
or about the other
Right? Because
person,
it's easy to,
especially.
like,
Yeah,
have someone hurt your feelings and you go to a friend and they just help activate you even more,
for sure. And then they end
and
up
that's
hating
really
your partner. Yeah.
yes, and then you resolve with your partner and your friend still hates your partner, like, then it's another dynamic that's hard to navigate.
Yeah, I think that's worth naming here, that cycle, this ego fluffing that we do to make the other person wrong. We collude with our friends to make them feel better and make the other person bad and wrong. This is not
Mhm,
what we're talking about. And that's just, it is a vicious cycle and it ramps you up and it gets you nowhere. And it certainly doesn't clarify
mhm,
anything or relieve any of this pressure buildup. What we're talking about when it's expressing your feelings and getting clarity in this way, you're expressing to get it out, and it is a backlog that you're getting out. So these triggers are activating something that lives inside you, and suppressing it does not cause it to go away or be hidden. As you say, it comes out sideways in your relationships. It comes out in self-loathing and self-harm, and it's coming out in all kinds of ways if you
mhm,
haven't made your way through it. And that's really what we're
yes.
talking about.
So, when your feelings get hurt, trigger happens, whatever you wanna call it. I sort of see this, it's an invitation for whether you will allow for an emotional enema.
Ah, yeah.
Because there is so much backlog, but
Yeah.
it's an opportunity to move some of that backlog. When you have at least one person who is willing to just hold that space for you to dump it out. And then after that dumping out, maybe you need some empathy and compassion, right? Because something did get stirred, a pain point got touched. And then maybe after that, you have a good enough friend. And by good enough, I mean just a friend who's aware and knows that this is helpful. Or you have a group of people who are also aware that they might say to you, okay, do you feel open to sort of explore the other side of this? Right? Are you ready for that yet? And if you're not ready, it's totally okay. But I want to let you know that I'm happy to support you to explore the other side, whether you want to call it the devil's advocate or the shadow side, or like, what's the other piece here that maybe it's easy to dismiss because it's easier to blame the other person? Or are you ready to explore what your part of the dance is?
Yeah.
And that's super valuable. We do it all the time in group setting, one-on-one setting, and I do it with my friends. And I
Mhm.
want my friends to do that with me, not always right away.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I just need to vent and dump and I need the empathy, I need the validation, I need to feel like someone's on my side. But if we always left the processing there, that would be a disservice to our people. It was a disservice to me to only be held in that empathy side. If no one is ever willing to say to me, "Hey, G, are you willing to look at your part of the dance?" Like, I'm happy to look at that with you with like so much compassion and so much curiosity. Because maybe there's parts of this that you haven't seen yet, haven't want to see yet, that if you were willing to shift a little, actually a lot of other bigger shifts would happen in your life. Like, I want that. I need that.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
not always gonna wanna do that for myself.
Indeed, yeah. That makes me think about, our conditioning around that, and I think it can be tricky because a lot of us grew up when you present your feelings to a caregiver, the response is not so empathetic and you're not being held. It might be, "Well, what did you do wrong?"
Mhm,
And some immediate exploring the other side and bypassing all the feelings, and I think a lot of people are programmed that way as well, so I think it's important what you said about the time that you wanna be held with empathy and you wanna be received, and
mhm,
then look at the bigger picture. Being able
mhm.
to acknowledge that the bigger picture exists, I think, can be a challenge.
And this is what's interesting, I think, about when I came across conscious relationship training. I felt ready for it because I had spent a number of years really diving into nonviolent communication and somatic empathy. So, really growing my self compassion muscle. So, by the time I had shadow work, like things fly at me, I was like, oh, I know how to hold myself with compassion. I know how to ask someone for compassion and empathy to help me be with this other news and information that's harder to see and feel. And that's what my system needed. I had a complete lack of empathy growing up. That if someone is now going to point out everything that I'm not doing right or everything that I'm missing and all my shadow stuff, I probably would have just been a puddle on the floor and completely overwhelmed. And I wouldn't be able to hear what they're saying, even though there's truth there and there's gold there for me.
Right.
My path was I need a lot more empathy first. Your path was a bit different. Right? But I think it's important to know who we are and how we're wired and what we're in need of in that particular time in our lives, right? And the more you know that, the more you can choose what kind of support fits you best in that season of life or just even in that moment. Like, I've had friends where we're very good at being super honest with each other, like hard, honest truth. And I remember one time my friend just gave it to me and I felt that hurt, and I could just feel, I'm gonna shut down right now. If I don't say anything and address what just happened, I'm gonna pretend like everything's fine. I'm gonna withdraw. I'm gonna isolate myself so I don't get the help that I actually need, and I'm gonna distance myself from this person. I'm gonna make them wrong.
Mm.
And I could pause enough to say that out loud, like, "Hey, I know you love me and it's coming from a loving place, but right now I need something softer." And she was on it. She's like, "Okay, let's switch gears." Right? We
Right.
want to be able to know when can I handle and need the hard truth and when do I need a softer approach? And notice whether you tend to lean only to one side because that will
Mhm.
be a good indication of like which muscle might need to grow in order for things to feel freer for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think I grew up in a situation that didn't feel empathetic to my feelings.
Mhm.
And then I swung so hard in the other direction. I went into social work and it was full empathy in, I think, a toxic way. I eventually 10 years to figure that out. And so then I swung back. It was like, oh, I've been working for 15 years in an industry where people are kind, but they've lost touch with that because they're in this behemoth system that's moving very slowly and it's unhelpful. And you end up full of anger, but you can't say any of that because you're too busy being kind. So then I just had this backlog of like, fuck yous and everybody else's fuck yous. And when we went into CRT, it was like, oh, thank God someone's finally just yelling fuck you. and they mean it. Hallelujah.
And I'm allowed to here.
I'm allowed to hear. So really symptomatic, right, of where I was at and what I needed, but
Mhm.
not symptomatic of who I am as a person at my core, right? That's what we're talking
Mhm.
about, all this muck that's obscuring who we are at our core. And it's all just
Mhm.
years of programming and what we've gotten used to and what we haven't been able to say out loud.
Yes, yes. I wonder if it's helpful to share some personal examples of my hurt feelings and how I've handled them in the past.
Sure. We're at about the 40-minute mark. So I wonder if you would share one or two of those and then walk us through something practical that we can do when we have this hurt feelings experience.
Okay. Um, okay, so story, two stories. One story, and it's really not even a story, but I started tracking that this happened so much that I was like, there it's stirring up something in me. What is it? So I decided to get curious. So it's the very simple act. Okay, my ex, the father of my kids, he's a very lovely person. He's Dutch. He's very straightforward and like a very kind, loving person. And occasionally he'd say to me, I'd be doing something, we co-parent really well. And so we also communicate a lot about what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done, whatever. And I'd noticed that every time he used the phrase, next time, could you blah, blah, blah. It could be as simple as next time, could you let me know if you're dropping by, so I know, to expect you. It doesn't matter. It was like really that plain Jane,
Yeah.
neutral, technically. I would feel the fire start to burn, and I would
Yeah.
feel the defenses, and in my mind, because I wanted to have a good co-parenting relationship with him, I don't really love conflict. I was just like, "Fuck you." But it was in my head. It wasn't out loud, but maybe it was in, some of my gestures or how I put the bag down on the floor or, like, whatever. And then at some point, I just started laughing to myself. I'm like, "What is happening?" Like, I decided to really listen to his words and replay them back. I'm like, all he said was, "Next time before you come, could you let me know?" Or, like, something along those lines. "Next time, if that were to happen, could you do this instead?"
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Really just expressing a preference
Yeah.
and, like, making a request.
Yeah.
But somehow it touched all my old woundings of I did something wrong. I did something wrong. Now I'm being scolded. I should have, like the old story in childhood is why didn't you think of that yourself?
Yeah.
Why do I even have to tell you this? Right?
Right.
And so it brings up so much shame. It also brings up so much, like, I feel like unjust trouble I got in as a kid that I never was allowed to say, screw you, or like, that's mean, or like, what are you talking about? You do this all the time, like, why are you just being mad at me? All that, that I never got to speak out loud to my parents is now swirling around me, and because he decided to express a preference in the most neutral tones of neutral, I've decided he's the enemy and
Yeah.
he's the jerk. And then I go immediately to, have you forgotten all the things that I've done for you and our children? And like mentally, that's where it goes, right? Of you're picking on me. Notice you're picking on me.
Yeah.
And it's very much hand in hand with, and you don't even see what I bring.
Right.
Right? Which is a childhood wound of you're getting mad at me for this, and you don't see all the good stuff that I do. All you do is point out what I do wrong.
Right.
Right? And so it totally stirs up that for me.
Yeah.
And now when he says, next time, could you something, something? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I can do that.
Right.
Because that's really all it is.
Yeah. That's really all it is. Yeah. I noticed the other day, maybe you had put something through Claude and sent me a chat, an AI chat. Anyway, I noticed this with myself and artificial intelligence causing me to have feelings. And it's obviously he meant to hurt my feelings, and he's a he.
Obviously.
Yeah. I've gotten so used to and repelled by positivity sandwiches. So give them feedback, but with something nice at the beginning and the end. So now when someone tells me something nice, I'm just waiting for the thing they'd like me to do differently. So I take a deep breath and I wait. And so when I feed something into an AI and it's giving me feedback, it's like, let me be honest with you about what I think. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I'm braced for your honesty. And then it just tells me a series of things that it agrees with what I've said. And that's the end. And I'm like, where was the negative? I was ready for the punch in the gut. Where was it? But it was nowhere. And it's just that little combination of words. Let me be really honest with you about what I think. Like, it's going to be bad.
Right? Like someone says that, AI says that, not even a someone. And we're like, "Oh, brace,
Yeah.
brace. This can only be bad news."
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that bracing is full of emotional content, which is going to come
Mhm.
out sideways if you don't deal with it in a safe
Mhm.
place.
Mhm. I had, I'll share one quick one and then one a really funny one. In a relationship, I don't even know how I got so, like, out of sorts. The person said, "And you don't even support me." I don't know, they were activated about something. And I don't know why, because in that moment, I couldn't just say, "Okay, if that's what you believe, that's okay." Because I actually knew that I supported this person in all different ways. And so I got so worked up that I got so angry. I'm like, "Are you effing kidding me? You're trying to tell me right now that I don't support you?" And I think what it stirred up for me was I wasn't paying attention. I think I wanted that connection to work out so well. I wasn't paying attention to when I had crossed my own boundaries of like, I actually shouldn't be supporting this person anymore.
Right.
Like, it's now taxing on me to offer the level of support that they are requiring. And I'm not being honest with myself about my capacity and willingness to actually do that in a genuine and abundant way.
Mhm.
And so it was interesting because when someone says, "Well, you don't even support me," sometimes it could trigger us because we don't believe we're supporting the person, right? But this time I was like, "I am supporting you. Like, what the heck?" But I
Mhm.
was pushing past all my boundaries, and I was like,
Yeah.
"I'm pushing past all my boundaries, and you still think I don't support you? Well,
Exactly.
yeah."
That's the biggest irritation, right? We're overgiving, we're abandoning ourselves, and now we're making it their fault instead of
Mhm.
noticing
Mhm.
ourselves.
And this sort of highlights a little bit of something I notice other people getting caught up in, is, like, there was something that he said in that moment that didn't feel true to actually what was happening. It felt hurtful in the way he said it. I don't wanna be spoken to that way, the way he said it just wasn't nice. And also, there's a part that was mine that's totally separate than that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we seem to think it's either gonna be one or the other. It's just my old stuff or it's them.
Right.
But often it's a mix of the 2.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what's actually, I find, fun now. Fun is a weird word to say, but fun now to be like, "Oh, which part of this is really related to right now, and which part is related to something different?" Like, I find that fun now to play around and be curious and discern and be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, this makes more sense now."
Yeah, right? And that's because whatever pool of emotional content was there has been more or less drained. So the wiring is still wired up. Someone presses the button and it goes, "Bah!" But then it leads down into nothing. There's no fuel for the fire there. And it ends up just being kind of an interesting relief, a neat thing to notice.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So the grand finale of stories
Mm,
is the beginning of a relationship. So you're still getting to know each other. You're still like, how do we operate? Do your words match your actions kind of thing. And when I tell you, you'll probably remember this, but I remember that we had only had phone conversations at that point and texting. And like we had finally made a date to have a video call. And so like that's exciting, when you're just starting a relationship with someone, starting to get to know someone. And we had set a time and a day. And earlier in that day, I had other plans. And this call was so important to me that I like made sure that everything would be worked out and planned out just right so that I would be home in time for this call. Well, 7 o'clock comes and goes. No call. No call, Stephanie.
We know what that means.
And I was like on the phone with you. Is he just like so and so?
Yeah.
You know, is he another one of those? And like the spiral of like, and I can't do another one of those. There's no way I'm not doing this again, right?
Not
And
doing
then
this again. That's
not
such a
doing this
great
again.
cue. Yeah.
And then there was a brief moment of clarity of, well, I guess I could also call him.
Mm.
And then it was like, no, I should not be the one who reaches out. I'm always the one reaching out, and I'm not chasing another man.
Right.
Meanwhile, I'm just connecting with this dude. Like, there has been no history of chasing. There has been no history of lopsided, I'm always reaching out. But I had fallen right back into an old relationship dynamic with someone
Yeah.
where there was so much hurt because I was always the one that had to extend. I was always the one that had to be like, hey, over there, are we doing this thing? And as you and I got more curious together about what was coming up for me, I realized that in my previous relationship, we made so many plans that sort of all just dissolved at the last minute without really any announcement. I was just left there to be like, oh, I guess it's not happening. And like how many times I felt so heartbroken and sad because of that,
Yeah.
that I thought this is the same thing is happening now. So, moment of clarity comes through of this is a different person. Okay, this is a different person. It could be totally different scenario. Oh, this just gets so good. So then I couldn't call because that was still too much, but I could text. And I couldn't text to say, "Hey, I thought we were having a call at 7 or whatever," because that felt too vulnerable. So I think I just said, "Hi."
Nice.
I was like,
Better
"Okay, it's
than
something.
that
It's better than
cue.
nothing,"
Yeah.
right? And then he probably said hi, and then maybe I had the courage to say, "What are you up to?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just doing repairs on the kitchen." Oh, and then the mind went, "Your freaking repairs on your kitchen are more important than this date that we had set up?" And that's where the mind is going. And then again, I had another moment of clarity. I'm like, I have had no evidence from this person that they don't follow through on their word, that they're out to hurt my feelings, that I'm not of importance. I've gotten all the evidence of the contrary, actually, that I'm of a lot of importance and all the things. And I was like, I wonder if maybe he's fixing up his house because, like that is also important to him, not because I'm not important. And in the end, I said, we sort of just talked like everything was fine. And I decided I do need to speak up for myself. My feelings were hurt, like that was not okay. We had a plan. So I'm like, okay, I need to say something. So I said, hey, so I know it's getting late now, but another time. Oh yeah. He also said, I said, so do you still want to do I thought we were getting on a video call. Do you want to do it? He said, no, I'm tired now. And oh dear. I made that mean all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Because my old self is like, I don't care if I'm tired. I will do anything for you and for connection. So if you're not willing to do that for me, it must mean I'm not that important to you.
Clearly.
Right? But then I had another moment of clarity. I'm like, a man is allowed to be tired. It's valid. They got to
Mhm.
get up early. So I was like, let that go. That doesn't need to be a personal thing. So then I finally said, no problem. But like, can we circle back to this sometime? Because like tonight didn't really feel good because, like I thought that we were going to have a video call at 7 and whatever. And I just suggested it as, can we talk someday about this? And immediately he calls. He's like, let's talk about it right now. What do you want to say? And I was like, well, I thought we were going to have a call. And he's like, yeah, I thought so too. I've been sitting here waiting for you. He's like, I just didn't want to disturb you with what you were doing because I knew that that was important. So I just figured when you were finished, you would call me.
Wow. Not a story you had as an option available, hey?
No, that was not, like, option E.
Yeah,
It was only, "He's a jerk, I'm not important, he's just like all the other dudes, just like the last one. See,
yeah,
I know I shouldn't have trusted him either."
yeah.
Those are the only options.
And the tired, I remember it being that he's tired. Oh, is he just like an old dud who wants to go to bed at 7?
Right?
When
So it
when wasn't
yeah,
he working on the kitchen because you were gonna come see the kitchen eventually, and he wanted
yes,
it to look nice for you?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, that's like, at some point, I'm like, "This person knows that I'm coming to visit at some point, and they want there to be a functioning kitchen."
amazing.
And, but it did occur to me eventually that that was a potential option, but it was not one of my first go-tos.
Yeah.
But luckily what I had was the slowing down of things, of I could call Steph, I could text Steph and just blast out all the stories in my mind. Then that energy could go somewhere,
Mhm.
and then I could have a little bit of quiet for a moment and be like, "Well, maybe," you know? Yeah, and I had at that time enough practice to say, "What's the evidence of the contrary that I have?" Right? I
Mhm.
have all these old stories, but what evidence do I actually have about this person and this connection?
Yeah. And once this had resolved itself and come full circle, would you say that you felt closer to each other afterwards?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the
I have
thing.
to say, every time, even in the relationships that have ended, right? What I noticed every time, if I was willing to, and it didn't need to be in the moment. Actually, I was pretty unskilled at being able to tell someone in the moment that my feelings were hurt. But what I progressively got better at was circling back and saying, "Hey, that thing last night or that thing last week, like, it hurt my feelings. Can I tell you more about that?" And each time I was willing to let someone know me more.
Mhm.
Right? Because what I was able to say in this scenario was, "Hey, I just wanna help you understand why this was hard for me if you're open to hearing." He's like, "Yeah, of course." Said, "I've just gone through this experience with this other relationship where this was happening all the time, of just feeling forgotten and like I don't matter, and like I should just be okay with someone making and breaking plans with me all the time." And, like, I've had enough of that feeling growing up, of feeling like I don't matter, and then to have it again in relationship and to have that feeling stirred up again here was really hard for me. And he was willing to say, like, not just willing, but it was his truth, like, "I never want you to feel that way with me. Like, you matter a lot."
Mhm.
Right? And that's the furthest thing from what's happening here. He's
Yeah,
like, "I just thought you would call me at 7. That's all."
right. So that's, I think, an important piece that I wanna highlight there is that if you have a hurt feelings situation with somebody where there is mutual care and respect, working through that will almost certainly bring you closer together. And
Mhm.
we really hide from that because 'cause we're just so afraid of loss and of expressing ourselves and of hurting each other. We're afraid to go into the hurt because 'cause we're trying to obviously avoid it, right? But it's
Yeah.
going in that and through it that brings so much more life and expansiveness and connection.
Yeah. I wanna also name this, like, in a previous relationship, if I ever mentioned a hurt feeling,
Yeah.
I'd now have to deal with their own shame
Yeah.
about it, right?
Classic.
And so that was hard. I'm like, "Well, now what am I supposed to do? Now I gotta make you feel better for the thing that you said that hurt my feelings, and who's making who feel better now?" It's just messy,
Yeah.
right? And so what felt really good in this relationship is this person being able to say, "I'm sorry, was definitely not the intention to give you the sense that you don't matter. This is what happened, you know? How about next time we do it this way instead?" I'm like, "Okay, let's try it that way instead." Now it's done, we feel closer to each other, it's resolved, we can move on. Um, but, like, when we are also afraid to say, "This hurt my feelings," because now we're afraid of hurting their feelings, it just goes in this vicious cycle that both people end up feeling really unhappy.
Yeah. True story. Okay, so walk us through something to help us be with our hurt feelings in a practically useful relational way.
Yeah. Well, let's go with this. I always find that the easiest way to practice is to practice with something we're reflecting on that has happened already. So, sitting in a way where you can, feel the support of the chair or the bed or the floor underneath you. If you want to offer yourself some touch that feels good, you can. Choose a moment or scenario where your feelings were hurt in connection with someone. And we're just using one sentence. We're not making this too complicated or too big. Say their name. Say their name and say, I'm just going to say Joe. Joe, that day when you said XYZ, that really hurt my feelings, or that really made me sad. Whatever it stirred up in you. Just notice what it's like to say their name and express that whatever happened hurt you. And notice how it feels in your body to say those words out loud. And whatever gets stirred up, whether it's a tightness somewhere or, a release of energy, something uncomfortable, you can say, I'm here and I'm learning to hold you. I'm learning to be with you, whatever the sensation is, this tightness in my stomach, whatever it is that got stirred up. And then you might even, I'll add a bonus round. You can use this prompt. Use the person's name again. Joe, what would have felt better in that moment was this, is this. And notice how that feels to say. And then that's it. Go do something that's better feeling, good feeling, whatever you want to do. Shake it off. That is the practice of owning what hurt me and then letting myself learn how to be with what gets stirred up instead of being so afraid of it we can't be with what it stirs up, and just doing it very briefly. And then owning the other side, which is declaring what it is that would feel better for you. Right? And here we're not even talking about saying this to the person. We're just talking about acknowledging it for yourself. That this is your truth. Your truth is that that thing hurt your feelings and this would feel better. Right? Yeah. Now, if you want to do the exploratory work of like, I wonder what it was about that exchange that was really not okay about the here and now. And I wonder if there's some part of it that relates to something old. You can do that. We can walk you through stuff like that. But like for the sake of this practice, this is really just doing the basics of, can you just say out loud the one thing that hurt you in one sentence? Can you let yourself feel it a bit in your body? Can you say the one thing out loud that would have felt better? And can you let yourself feel how that feels? And when you have the muscle to be able to do that in a way where you still feel sturdy and okay with the people you're in connection with, your whole life gets to change. Your relationships change.
Yeah, you've described holding your own feelings, something most of us did not grow up experiencing or learn how to do. And it changes everything. Thanks, Chi-Chi. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's it then for today. And we will talk a lot more about all sorts of things next time, which is in a couple of weeks. I think we're back May 6th, as I recall.
Okay.
Okay, as always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.